Elon Musk says you were not supposed to see this, but time is running out. Don't skip. Stay with this till the end. This message may resonate more than you expect. Sometimes something appears in front of you and you don't know why you stopped. You didn't plan to. You weren't searching for it. Yet here you are, paused in a moment that feels slightly out of time. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this quiet hesitation, in the way your attention slowed instead of moving on. You've learned that the most meaningful moments don't announce themselves loudly. They arrive subtly, almost unnoticed, and only later do you realize they mattered. Stay with me. This part matters. For a long time, you've been moving forward quietly. Carrying responsibility without constant recognition. Thinking deeply while appearing calm on the surface. That kind of inner work often goes unseen, even by yourself. But it accumulates. And something important is taking shape. You didn't arrive here by accident. Not because of chance, and not because of urgency. You arrived here because your awareness has been changing. Because your attention has become more selective. Because you've learned when to slow down instead of rushing past what feels meaningful. Stay with this. You may notice that lately, your thoughts don't pull you as forcefully as they used to. You still think deeply, but you don't spiral as easily. There's more space now between a thought and a reaction. That space is clarity learning how to lead. There's a reason messages like this don't feel like information. They feel like recognition. They don't tell you who you should be. They reflect who you are becoming. Something important is taking shape. You've likely experienced periods where things felt delayed. Where progress seemed slower than it should have been. At the time, it may have felt frustrating. Now, it begins to feel purposeful. Those pauses taught you patience without passivity. They taught you how to stay engaged without burning out. Stay with me. You're not in the same place you were before, even if your surroundings look similar. Your internal world has shifted. Your awareness is sharper. Your focus is more intentional. You don't give your energy away as easily. These changes don't make noise, but they change outcomes. Something important is taking shape because you stayed consistent when quitting would have been easier. You may notice that urgency doesn't control you the way it once did. You still care deeply. You're still motivated. But you're no longer rushing to arrive. That shift alone changes how progress responds to you. Stay with this. This part matters. The idea suggested by the title isn't about secrecy or fear. It's about attention. About recognizing moments that ask you to be present rather than distracted. When time feels like it's running out, it's often not about scarcity. It's about awareness sharpening. You might feel calmer lately, even when answers aren't fully clear. That calm isn't detachment. It's readiness without pressure. It's knowing you can respond thoughtfully when the moment calls for it. Something important is taking shape. Think about how much you've handled quietly. Decisions without guarantees. Effort without applause. You carried weight without letting it harden you. Instead, it refined you. That refinement is why clarity feels more accessible now. Stay with me. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This is the midpoint many people never reach. The moment you stop waiting for permission and start trusting awareness. When that happens, you don't chase direction. You recognize it. You may notice that distractions no longer hold you the way they once did. Conversations feel different. Priorities rearrange themselves. This isn't loss. It's alignment. Something important is taking shape. As this awareness settles, progress becomes quieter but more reliable. Decisions feel simpler. Movement feels intentional. You're no longer fighting yourself. Stay with this till the end. This message isn't here to promise anything external. It's here to reflect something internal. That your steadiness has been preparing you. That your patience wasn't passive. That your clarity didn't appear by accident. Slow the pace here. Let that settle. The next steps won't announce themselves loudly. They'll feel obvious. Calm. Familiar. You'll recognize them not by excitement, but by ease. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters more than it might seem at first. If you're still here, notice how naturally you continued. Not because you were pulled by urgency, but because something in this pace felt familiar. You didn't need a reason to stay. You simply did. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this quiet willingness to remain present. You've reached a stage where attention isn't scattered the way it used to be. You don't jump from one thought to another as quickly. You let things unfold before reacting. That shift didn't happen overnight. It came from experience teaching you what deserves your focus and what doesn't. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that lately, your inner conversations feel different. Less pressure. Less self-criticism. More observation. You still question things, but you don't attack yourself for not having immediate answers. That change signals growth that doesn't need to be announced. Stay with me. For a long time, you may have felt like you were waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for momentum. Waiting for something to finally click. But now, that waiting feels different. It feels less like anticipation and more like understanding settling into place. You're not in a rush anymore. And that's not because you've given up. It's because you trust your timing more than you trust noise. Something important is taking shape because you learned how to slow down without stopping. Think about how you respond to uncertainty now. It doesn't pull you into panic the way it once did. You don't immediately assume something is wrong just because something is unclear. You stay with it. You let clarity form. That ability didn't come from avoiding challenges. It came from facing them repeatedly and realizing you could handle more than you thought. Stay with this. You may recognize that your sense of direction feels quieter now, but more reliable. You don't need dramatic signs or constant reassurance. You check in with yourself first. And when something aligns, you feel it clearly, without needing to explain it. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that you're more selective about where you place your energy. Not because you've become closed off, but because you respect your capacity. You no longer feel the need to be everywhere or everything at once. That discernment protects your focus. Stay with me. This part matters. The idea suggested by the title isn't meant to create fear or urgency. It's meant to reflect a moment of awareness. A recognition that attention matters. That presence matters. That moments you once overlooked now feel worth staying with. You've learned that time doesn't always run out in the way people describe. Sometimes it sharpens. It asks you to notice what's already here instead of chasing what isn't. Something important is taking shape. You may feel calmer now than you did earlier, even as this message continues. That calm isn't passivity. It's confidence without tension. It's knowing you can respond thoughtfully when needed, instead of reacting automatically. Stay with this. You're beginning to understand that clarity isn't something you chase. It's something that arrives when you create space for it. And you've been creating that space quietly, through choices no one else saw. You rested when rest felt right. You paused when pushing would have cost you balance. You continued when quitting would have been easier. Those choices mattered. Something important is taking shape because you stayed consistent without needing recognition. You may notice that your relationship with effort has changed. You still apply yourself, but you don't equate effort with struggle anymore. You understand that progress can be calm. That movement doesn't need force. Stay with me. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding brings a quiet confidence to how you move through the world. You don't rush conversations. You don't fill silence unnecessarily. You listen more deeply. And when you speak, your words carry intention. People may not always notice it immediately, but they feel it. Situations respond to it. Opportunities approach more naturally when you're grounded. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that old expectations have started to loosen their grip. Timelines you once pressured yourself to meet no longer feel as heavy. You've released the idea that growth must look a certain way by a certain time. That release didn't slow you down. It freed you. Stay with this. You've reached a point where you don't measure progress only by outcomes. You notice it in how you feel while moving forward. Whether you're steady. Whether you're aligned. Whether you're still connected to yourself. That awareness keeps you from losing yourself in the process. Something important is taking shape. As this part continues, notice how your body responds. Your breathing slows. Your shoulders relax. These signals matter. They reflect internal alignment. When your awareness and your pace match, engagement becomes effortless. You don't need to rush ahead. You don't need to hold back. You trust yourself to recognize what aligns when it appears. Stay with me. This part matters. You may feel that your confidence now comes less from certainty and more from trust. Trust in your ability to adjust. Trust in your ability to recover. Trust in your ability to choose again if needed. That trust removes fear from movement. Something important is taking shape because you've learned to move without abandoning yourself. As this part moves toward its close, notice how engagement feels now. Not intense. Not passive. Balanced. That balance is something you've been cultivating longer than you realize. You don't need to extract a message from this moment. You don't need to label it. Simply notice how it feels to remain present without pressure. That feeling is alignment. Stay with this. Carry this steadiness forward as you continue. Let it guide how you listen, how you decide, how you respond to what comes next. You don't need urgency to move forward. You need awareness. And that awareness is already here. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters because it connects everything you've been sensing into something steady and usable. If you're still here, notice how your attention feels now. It isn't tight. It isn't drifting. It's settled. That kind of engagement doesn't come from excitement. It comes from trust. Trust that staying present is more valuable than rushing forward. You may recognize yourself in this calm willingness to continue. You've reached a phase where your focus no longer needs constant stimulation. Earlier, you may have relied on pressure or urgency to stay engaged. Now, when something aligns, you remain without effort. That shift didn't happen by chance. It came from learning, over time, what actually matters to you. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your inner world feels less noisy. Thoughts still appear, but they don't demand immediate action. You allow them to pass, choosing which ones deserve your attention. That choice creates clarity, and clarity creates direction. Stay with me. You've likely realized that clarity isn't something you force. It emerges when you stop fighting uncertainty and start listening to it. Uncertainty used to feel uncomfortable. Now, it feels informative. It shows you where growth is happening. Think about how you handle moments of not knowing now. You don't panic. You don't assume failure. You stay curious. That curiosity keeps you engaged without draining you. Something important is taking shape because you learned how to remain open without losing stability. You may notice that your sense of identity has softened. Not weakened, but loosened. You're less attached to rigid ideas about who you should be or where you should be by now. That flexibility allows you to grow without resistance. Stay with this. You're beginning to see that progress isn't always about adding more. Sometimes it's about subtracting what no longer fits. Old expectations. Old comparisons. Old pressures. Letting those go doesn't slow you down. It frees you. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding shows up in how you make decisions. You don't rush them, but you don't avoid them either. You sense when something aligns and when it doesn't. That sensitivity wasn't always there. It was built through experience. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your energy feels more consistent now. You don't swing as wildly between motivation and exhaustion. You found a rhythm that supports you. That rhythm allows you to keep going without burning out. Stay with me. This part matters. You've also learned how to be patient with yourself. Not indulgent, but fair. You recognize that growth doesn't happen in straight lines. You allow room for adjustment without labeling it as failure. That patience creates resilience. You may recognize that your relationship with time has shifted again. You're less focused on deadlines imposed by others and more attentive to your own internal timing. You move when it feels right, not when pressure demands it. Something important is taking shape because you're honoring your pace. As this part continues, notice how your attention returns to center more quickly after distraction. When something pulls you off course, you don't stay lost. You come back. That ability to return is more important than never drifting at all. Stay with this. You're learning that confidence doesn't require certainty. It requires trust. Trust in your ability to respond, adjust, and continue. You don't need to predict every outcome to feel secure. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding also changes how you engage with others. You listen more deeply. You speak with intention. You don't feel the need to fill silence or impress. That presence creates connection without effort. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that challenges now feel less personal. You don't interpret them as reflections of your worth. You see them as situations to navigate. That perspective keeps you grounded. Stay with me. This part matters. You've reached a point where you don't need to constantly remind yourself to stay focused. Focus returns on its own when you slow down. That's awareness becoming reliable. You might also notice that your inner dialogue has become more supportive. You encourage yourself rather than criticize. You reflect rather than judge. That internal tone affects everything. Something important is taking shape because you changed how you speak to yourself. As this part unfolds, notice how your body responds. There's less tension. Your breathing is steadier. These signals matter. They show that your internal and external rhythms are beginning to align. Stay with this. You don't need to push forward aggressively to make progress. You don't need to hold back out of fear. You trust that the next step will reveal itself when you're ready to take it. You're beginning to recognize that readiness feels calm, not dramatic. It feels like knowing you can handle what comes next without rehearsing it endlessly. Something important is taking shape. As this part moves toward its close, notice how engagement feels now. Balanced. Grounded. Sustainable. That's not something you found suddenly. It's something you've been building quietly. You don't need to rush ahead to secure what's next. You don't need to stay frozen either. You trust your awareness to guide you moment by moment. Stay with me. Carry this sense of clarity forward. Let it guide how you choose, how you listen, how you move through the rest of your day. You don't need urgency to move forward. You need presence. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters because it brings you into a deeper sense of continuity with everything you've already felt. If you're still here, notice how your attention feels now. It isn't curious in the same way it was at the beginning. It's steadier. More settled. That tells you something important. You're no longer listening to find something missing. You're listening because this space feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this grounded presence. You've entered a phase where awareness doesn't rush to label experiences. You allow moments to unfold before deciding what they mean. Earlier in life, uncertainty may have felt uncomfortable. Now, it feels neutral. sometimes even useful. That change reflects growth that happened quietly, without needing to be acknowledged. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your reactions have slowed in a way that feels supportive. Not delayed, but intentional. You don't respond just to fill space. You wait until your response feels true. That pause protects your energy and sharpens your clarity. Stay with me. You've learned that not everything needs to be resolved immediately. Some things make more sense when you give them time. That patience isn't avoidance. It's discernment. It allows understanding to arrive naturally instead of being forced. Think about how you handle pressure now. You don't collapse under it. You don't fight it either. You observe it. You work with it. That relationship with pressure keeps you steady even when circumstances shift. Something important is taking shape because you stop treating discomfort as an enemy. You might notice that your internal expectations have become more realistic. You no longer demand constant progress from yourself. You understand that growth includes pauses, adjustments, and rest. That understanding makes progress sustainable. Stay with this. You're beginning to recognize that alignment doesn't always feel exciting. Often, it feels calm. Like things are finally moving at a pace that fits you. That calm doesn't mean you've lost ambition. It means ambition has become integrated rather than urgent. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding changes how you experience motivation. You don't rely on bursts of energy. You rely on rhythm. You show up consistently, even when motivation fluctuates. That consistency builds trust within yourself. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your focus now feels narrower, but stronger. You're less interested in doing everything. You're more interested in doing what matters. That refinement isn't limitation. It's clarity deciding where to go. Stay with me. This part matters. You've also learned how to listen to subtle signals. Fatigue, tension, ease. You don't ignore them anymore. You adjust accordingly. That responsiveness prevents burnout and keeps you aligned with your capacity. Think about how you now relate to rest. Rest doesn't feel like falling behind. It feels like preparation. Like integration. You allow yourself to recover without guilt. That permission strengthens future action. Something important is taking shape because you stopped equating rest with weakness. You might sense that your confidence feels different now. Less emotional. More grounded. It doesn't rise and fall dramatically. It stays. That stability allows you to engage without fear of losing balance. Stay with this. You're learning that engagement doesn't require constant stimulation. It requires presence. When you're present, even simple moments feel meaningful. That presence changes how you experience time. Moments feel fuller. Not longer, but more complete. You may also notice that your relationship with comparison has softened. You don't measure yourself against others as often. You're more focused on your own trajectory. That shift frees energy that used to be spent on doubt. Something important is taking shape. As this part continues, notice how your inner dialogue sounds. It's less harsh. Less demanding. More supportive. That tone matters. It influences how you experience challenges and how you recover from them. Stay with me. This part matters. You've reached a point where you trust yourself to adapt. You don't need everything to go perfectly to move forward. You know you can adjust when needed. That trust removes fear from movement. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding also changes how you approach decisions. You don't need endless analysis. You sense alignment more quickly. When something feels right, you move. When it doesn't, you pause. That simplicity brings ease. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your sense of identity feels less rigid. You allow yourself to evolve without seeing it as inconsistency. You're comfortable growing out of old versions of yourself. That flexibility supports long-term growth. Stay with this. You've learned that influence doesn't come from force. It comes from steadiness. People sense when someone is grounded. They respond differently. Conversations feel more balanced. Opportunities arise without pressure. You're not trying to control outcomes. You're creating conditions for alignment. Something important is taking shape. As this part moves toward its close, notice how engagement feels now. It's calm. Sustainable. You don't feel the need to rush ahead or disengage. You're simply here. That state is something you've been practicing, even before you had words for it. Stay with me. You don't need to extract a lesson from this moment. You don't need to define it. Just notice how it feels to remain present without urgency. That feeling is clarity settling in. Carry this awareness with you as you continue. Let it guide how you choose, how you rest, how you respond to what comes next. You don't need to hurry. You don't need to stop. You're moving at a pace that fits who you are now. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters because it brings everything into a quieter, deeper alignment. If you're still here, notice how engagement feels now. It's not driven by curiosity anymore. It's driven by familiarity. You're not listening to discover something new. You're listening because this space feels grounded. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this calm steadiness, in the way you no longer need urgency to stay present. You've arrived at a point where awareness feels more reliable than momentum. Earlier in your life, movement itself may have felt reassuring. As long as things were happening, it felt like progress. Now, you understand something deeper. Progress can exist even when things are quiet. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your internal pace has slowed, but your direction feels clearer. You don't rush to respond. You don't fill silence unnecessarily. You allow moments to settle before deciding what they mean. That patience didn't come from indecision. It came from learning that clarity needs space. Stay with me. You've likely realized that many of the pressures you once carried weren't actually yours. Expectations placed on you by timelines, comparisons, or assumptions about how things should unfold. Letting go of those expectations didn't stop your growth. It allowed it to move in a way that fit you. Think about how often you used to question whether you were doing enough. Whether you were moving fast enough. Whether you were falling behind. Those questions don't have the same weight now. Not because everything is resolved, but because you trust yourself more deeply. Something important is taking shape because you stopped measuring yourself against noise. You may notice that your energy feels more contained now. Not restricted, but focused. You're less scattered. You don't feel pulled in as many directions. When you commit to something, your attention stays with it longer. That focus creates depth. Stay with this. You're beginning to understand that depth matters more than speed. That building something solid often requires staying with it longer than feels comfortable. You've developed the patience to do that. You don't abandon things just because they aren't immediately rewarding. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding shows up in how you handle setbacks. When something doesn't go as planned, you don't immediately interpret it as failure. You ask what it's showing you. You adjust without self-judgment. That response keeps you engaged instead of discouraged. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your confidence now feels quieter. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be proven. It's present in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you listen. That kind of confidence doesn't fluctuate as much. Stay with me. This part matters. You've also learned how to recognize when something no longer fits. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. You simply notice a subtle misalignment. And instead of forcing yourself to stay, you allow yourself to move on. That discernment protects your energy. Think about how your boundaries have evolved. You don't over-explain them. You don't defend them aggressively. You simply honor them. That quiet consistency makes them stronger. Something important is taking shape because you respect your limits. You may notice that your relationship with effort feels more balanced. You still work. You still apply yourself. But you don't equate effort with strain anymore. You understand that sustained progress often feels calm, not exhausting. Stay with this. You've reached a stage where rest feels integrated into movement. You don't see it as a pause in progress. You see it as part of progress. That shift allows you to continue without depleting yourself. You're also becoming more aware of how your body responds to alignment. When something fits, your body relaxes. When something doesn't, tension appears. You pay attention to those signals now. They guide you more reliably than overthinking. Something important is taking shape. You may recognize that your sense of purpose feels less abstract. It's not a distant idea anymore. It shows up in how you choose your time, how you engage with others, how you prioritize your energy. Purpose becomes practical when awareness matures. Stay with me. This part matters. You're learning that you don't need to chase meaning. Meaning emerges when you're present with what you're doing. Even ordinary moments feel more complete when you're fully there. That presence changes how life feels. You might also notice that your tolerance for unnecessary drama has decreased. You don't get pulled into it as easily. Not because you're detached, but because you value stability. You protect your peace without guilt. Something important is taking shape because you chose calm confidence over reaction. As this part continues, notice how your attention feels anchored. Not rigid. Not stuck. Anchored. You're able to engage without being consumed. That balance allows you to stay present longer. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding changes how you view the idea of time running out. It no longer feels like pressure. It feels like awareness sharpening. A reminder to stay present with what matters instead of postponing it indefinitely. You don't feel rushed by this awareness. You feel clarified by it. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your conversations have become more intentional. You listen more deeply. You speak with less filler. Your words feel considered. That presence creates connection without effort. Stay with this. You've reached a point where you don't need external validation to stay engaged. You trust your internal sense of alignment. When something feels right, you continue. When it doesn't, you pause. That simplicity creates ease. Think about how you now handle moments of doubt. They still appear, but they don't take over. You acknowledge them without letting them dictate your actions. That relationship with doubt keeps you moving. Something important is taking shape because you learn to coexist with uncertainty. As this part moves toward its close, notice how engagement feels now. It's steady. Sustainable. You don't feel pulled forward or pushed back. You're simply here. That state isn't accidental. It's the result of many small choices you made to slow down, to listen, to adjust. Choices that didn't look impressive at the time, but changed how you experience everything now. Stay with me. You don't need to rush to the next part of your life. You don't need to cling to this one either. You trust that awareness will guide the transition naturally. Carry this steadiness with you. Let it influence how you decide, how you rest, how you respond. You don't need urgency to move forward. You need clarity. Stay with me. Don't skip. This final part matters, not because it introduces something new, but because it allows everything to settle into place. If you're still here, notice how your attention feels now. It isn't searching. It isn't tense. It's simply present. That presence didn't arrive by chance. It arrived because you allowed yourself to stay. You didn't rush ahead. You didn't pull away. You remained open long enough for understanding to deepen. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this calm awareness, in the way you're no longer waiting for something dramatic to happen in order to feel aligned. Throughout this entire journey, nothing demanded belief from you. Nothing pressured you to act. Nothing promised outcomes. And yet, something meaningful unfolded anyway. That's because the most important shifts don't happen through force. They happen through recognition. Something important has been taking shape all along. You've likely noticed that your inner world feels more stable now. Not perfect. Not silent. But balanced. Thoughts come and go without pulling you off center. Emotions move through you without overwhelming your direction. That balance wasn't given to you. It was built, moment by moment, through awareness. Stay with me. You've learned how to listen to yourself without overanalyzing. You've learned how to pause without doubting your worth. You've learned how to move forward without abandoning your peace. Those lessons didn't arrive all at once. They accumulated quietly. And now, they live inside you as calm confidence. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding doesn't ask you to hurry. It doesn't tell you time is running out in a way that creates fear. Instead, it sharpens your attention. It reminds you that presence matters. That choices made with awareness carry more weight than choices made in urgency. The idea of time running out isn't about pressure. It's about clarity. About realizing that moments are most powerful when you're fully in them, not when you're rushing past them. Something important has been taking shape because you learned how to stay present. You may notice that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself as much. Your decisions feel more internal now. You trust your reasoning. You trust your pacing. You trust your ability to adjust when needed. That trust removes friction from movement. Stay with this. You've also learned how to let go without resistance. When something no longer fits, you don't cling to it out of habit. You release it calmly. That ability creates space for alignment to continue unfolding. Your relationship with effort has changed too. You still care. You still engage. But you no longer equate effort with struggle. You understand that sustained progress often feels steady, not exhausting. Something important has been taking shape because you chose sustainability over urgency. As this final part continues, notice how your body feels. Your breathing is slower. Your shoulders are less tense. These signals matter. They reflect internal alignment. When your body and awareness move together, engagement becomes effortless. You're no longer bracing for what comes next. You're open to it. You may also notice that your sense of identity feels more flexible now. You're less attached to fixed ideas about who you should be. You allow yourself to evolve without seeing it as inconsistency. That flexibility supports growth without conflict. Stay with me. This part matters. You've reached a point where confidence doesn't need reinforcement. It doesn't rise dramatically with success or collapse with setbacks. It stays. It's rooted in experience rather than expectation. You've seen yourself handle uncertainty. You've watched yourself adapt. You've proven to yourself that you can continue even when things are unclear. That evidence lives inside you now. Something important has already taken shape. As this message comes toward its end, notice that nothing here is asking you to hold on to it tightly. There's no cliffhanger. No demand. No urgency. That's intentional. It mirrors the state you're learning to operate from, engaged, aware, but not attached. You don't need to extract a lesson from this moment. You don't need to label it. Simply notice how it feels to remain present without pressure. That feeling is alignment. You've learned that peace doesn't mean stopping. It means moving without resistance. It means trusting your internal timing. It means allowing progress to unfold naturally instead of forcing it into shape. And that's where this truly connects to the title. When something says, You were not supposed to see this, it doesn't mean secrecy. It means readiness. It means not everyone would pause here. Not everyone would stay. Not everyone would recognize this moment for what it is. But you did. Not because you were told to. Not because you were afraid to miss out. But because your awareness recognized something familiar. Something steady. Something aligned. Time isn't running out in a way that threatens you. It's becoming more valuable because you're paying attention to it now. You're choosing presence over distraction. Intention over impulse. Calm confidence over noise. Something important continues to take shape because of that. As you move on from here, carry this steadiness with you. Let it guide how you listen, how you choose, how you respond to what comes next. You don't need to rush forward. You don't need to hold back. You trust yourself to recognize alignment when it appears. That trust is enough. Stay grounded. Stay aware. And move forward at the pace that feels true to who you are now. This moment didn't demand urgency from you. It invited recognition. And you answered.